They filled their days in the basement with fantasy and games. Louiza Weintraub and her sister Liana lived in that world with their parents, even as their stomachs ached for food and their bodies craved sunlight.
My mother would read to us. My sister and I, we were inseparable, of course, because we had no place to go. My dad had invented games for us to play. He had taken, I remember, like a little piece of wood and wrapped it in a cloth, and we used it as a hopscotch thing. So when we jumped, nobody could hear our jumping.
When night arrived, they waited for the signal from above.
He had the handle of the broom, and every night after the Germans would go by, he would take the handle of the broom and hit it, on their ceiling. And then we knew that the coast was clear. So it was 2 bedrooms, which my mother and my dad, and right across it was my sister and I, and we had a little window about this big that they had blocked with sand, for when the bombs would hit, so that they had the sand there. But at night we were able to sort of pull one bag out and sort of stick our little heads out and look out for the moon and the stars, and always amazed that it was so quiet.
Stars scattered like salt across the night sky. Under those same celestial lights, in the Führer bunker, Hitler's air raid shelter in Berlin, Germany, sat a decorative desktop globe. A swastika covered Europe with an inscription written over the Soviet Union, "I am coming." It was the beginning of Hitler's plan for world domination. But for now, Louiza's world was a basement, the stars a temporary escape.
And then once in a while we would hear the noise with the foot soldiers coming in, and it was the most frightening thing for 2 little girls running, jumping on our parents' beds. Like then my dad jumping over, we forgot to put the sand back.
The next day, the sun rose over the crimes against humanity being committed in Greece. One particular photo shows Greek civilians being lined up by German paratroopers in preparation for their execution. The war was at Louiza's doorstep. It wouldn't be long before she and her sister found themselves at a Catholic church, Liana's beautiful singing voice lifting to the handcrafted rafters, echoing off the stained glass depictions of Mary as she gazes into the eyes of her newborn son, the music bringing holiday cheer to a group of people who wanted nothing more than to see Louiza, Liana, and their people dead. I'm Doug Frazier, and this is Stars Among Us. It's 1942 in Salonika, Greece. German officers have taken over a 6-story building in the middle of downtown. If you hadn't heard about their arrival, you could walk by and know it. Officers in their vehicles sat in clear view.
The Germans who came in, they would take my dad and take him in the what they used to call the Kommandatur at the time, which is a place where you used to be in to prove if you were Jewish or you were not Jewish, that you needed your papers. But then my mother would have been, if she was Catholic, she would find out that that's where they had taken my dad. So she would go there and prove that with her being Catholic, they could not, it was an intermarriage. Therefore, they would allow my dad to leave every time.
Louiza's dad's luck, if you can call it that, was running on fumes. His friend knew it and took him aside to warn him.
His name was Hadzidakis. It was a friend that he had known for a long time. They were in the same business together.
Hadid worked near a bus stop, a central hub for rumors and speculation. But the through line was this: if Louiza and her family were to survive, they had to go into hiding.
And of course, we didn't believe it, just like everybody else. But he was the one that asked my dad, insisted actually, for us to stay in the basement, taking quite a chance. So we went there and we stayed there for, I would say, almost a year, down the basement, my sister and I, my dad and my mother. But this gentleman was the one that really, I could honestly say, saved our lives.
With each day that passed, Louiza's father felt the tightening of the German vice and a growing guilt. He was Jewish, It was him they were after. If he left, he might be able to direct the attention away from his Catholic wife and their children. He didn't see another choice. So he left. Soon after, Louiza's mother and the kids also left.
It was a matter of constantly moving from place to place. In the same town, but we were moving from apartment to apartment, hoping they would lose track of us. And I remember we went down to a hotel in downtown Salonika, and she rented a room, and we sat there for 3 days. You know, we slept daytime, we slept at night. We were so hungry because we couldn't leave the hotel room. And then she decided that she just couldn't do it anymore. It was too much for her. You know, we were always hungry, we were crying. So that's when she decided to take us to the orphanage. They assumed that, we were both Catholic, and my mother being Catholic, she never admitted to them that she was married to a Jew. And by this time, the bombs were incredible. They were falling all around us, and all the suffering that was going on around us, that my mother kept coming. She would come like every month if she could, and she would bring us a little piece of candy, but never found out what happened to our father, because I guess she was just afraid to say. My sister and I would cry every night. We missed our mother so bad. And all this time it was, where is mom and where is dad? And my sister used to say, one day, we're all gonna go home together. I promise you. Though the nuns were fantastic, they really were super. They supported us, they would guide us throughout this, but still, we still wanted to be with our parents, and we couldn't understand why we couldn't be.
Liana's singing talents offered a distraction for her and Louiza. Christmas Eve Mass was coming up, and the nuns asked Liana to perform the song Ave Maria. She happily agreed.
We had to cross the street and go where the church was. And the Germans had put the barricades that you had to, because you needed passes to get out after a certain time. So they lifted the barricade for the two little girls to go by, not knowing that they were lifting the barricade for two Jewish little girls to go by. And we went to church.
They walked in to find a packed congregation.
And I sat in the front pew.
Taking a glimpse over her shoulder, Louiza caught a nightmarish sight. Row after row of German soldiers. Liana took the stage in front of the all-Nazi crowd, a Jewish girl pretending to be Catholic, the enemy's eyes focused on her.
And my sister, with her wonderful little voice, said, Ave Maria.
Liana was joined by two Germans playing accompanying instruments. She sang as though her life depended on it, holding back tears and a swirling sense that if there was a stained glass depiction of modern hell in the church's windows, it would depict that very moment. Together, within the enemy lines where sounds of mass murder echoed across Europe, these two Nazis and one young Jewish girl assuming the guise of a Catholic to save her life made beautiful music together.
And to this day, when I hear that song, all I can see is my little sister in front of me singing that powerful voice and thinking, how can these two Germans sit there and play and have these two little Jewish girls sitting there scared to death that they're going to capture us? And after it was finished, we left. We went back to the orphanage. And I remember the nuns had made like a little special out of grits. God, that was awful. But that's all they had. It was like a little party for my sister. My mother came with my dad to see us in the orphanage and told us we were going to go home. He had lost so much weight and he looked so tired. So they took us out of the orphanage and we went back to the apartment. It couldn't have been 2 days, but like 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody started banging at the door, and they came and got us, the Germans. They put us in the truck, and they took us in the Kommandantur office, and we stayed there overnight. And that's where all the Jews there, they were putting them in trucks to take them away to a train station. And we were all sitting there with my mom, my dad, and we were all, people were crying and screaming because by this time they knew what was happening. I remember my mom and my dad holding hands and us. And I remember looking at my father and my father shaking his head to me because I was praying I was doing my Catholic prayer.
A German soldier approached her father.
Leon Halfon? And my father said, yes. He said, come with me. We walked in this office, and this officer opened the door, and it was an officer Gestapo sitting behind the desk.
The German officer greeted them in Greek, their native language.
Beautiful Greek. Beautiful Greek. But I remember my father holding me, and his hand was shaking. And he said to my dad, are you Leon Halfon? And my father said, yes. He says, what do you do for a living? And my father says, I repair automobiles. He says, you do? Do you know how to fix trucks? And my father said, yeah.
After a moment in thought, the officer turned his attention to Louiza.
So he said, come here. And I sat on his lap. And he was telling me that he had a little girl just like me at home. And next thing I know, he says, take your family and go. So I remember my dad get hold of my little hand again, and he said, come on, don't walk, run. And we ran and picked up my mother and my sister, and he had given some sort of pass, and we gave it to the German, and we left.
Louiza's father made a deal with the Germans, his expertise in exchange for his family's safety. The next day, he opened his store and welcomed German military vehicles.
With the understanding that if something happened, if there was an explosion or a sabotage or something like that, he would have to pay with his life.
It wasn't long after that bells from the Greek Orthodox Church rang out, signifying the end of the war.
And then the people started running in the street, and with joy, everybody saying, the war is over, the war is over. And that was in 1945. I remember taking my sister, and we were jumping up and down. And my father putting his finger in front of me and says, you are Jewish. That's the first thing he told me. You are Jewish. A couple of weeks went by. We went back to the Catholic Church, and my father had to inform them that we were Jewish, that they really thanked them for what they did for us, which they did a lot. But life goes on, and we had to go back to being Jewish. And I realized how much I had missed. And I realized how much fun it was to do Purim and to do Hanukkah and to do all these things, over the periods that I had missed. And most important, I could relate. When they said my father this and my grandfather that, it all came back to me.
Stars Among Us is brought to you by the Holocaust Commission of the United Jewish Federation of Tidewater and other fine sponsors, and has been funded in part by a grant from Virginia Humanities. If you're interested in finding out more about the Holocaust and Louiza Weintraub's story, please visit holocaustcommission.org/starsamongus. Our producer is Elka Mennick. Our executive producers are Wendy Jurin-Auerbach and Gail Litwin-Flax. Special thank you to Lauren Paley, who sang Ave Maria in this episode. You can hear more of her incredible stairwell singing by searching for her on YouTube, TikTok, and other social media platforms. Stars Among Us is distributed by WHRO Public Media.